clock that had 24 different chiming sounds it would make in my house. But I did not have enough to do. I would go visit relatives. That wasn't enough. I'd worked my whole life. I'd worked outside much of my life, and now they're telling me to stop doing it. And now it's 1824, and it's been said about me and my personality, the black dog bites Joseph Ellicott. I have fits of melancholy. I don't get along with people. And now they want to send me down that canal that I brought to Western New York to an institution, Bloomingdale, for them to see if they can help me. So here I am talking to you so that you can remember my name, so you can tell my name, tell my story, so people will remember me. And with that, I need to pack. I hope you will remember Joseph Ellicott.
Joseph Ellicott's health declined rapidly after he was sent to Bloomingdale Asylum in New York City in 1824. It was written, life became a twisted world of tormented thoughts, whirling confusion, and deep neurosis. It was at the asylum on August 19th, 1826, that Ellicott took his own life by hanging himself at the age of 66. He was originally buried in New York City, but later reinterred in a family plot in his beloved Batavia. Ellicott would be pleased to know that his name lives on in every corner of Western New York in the naming of creeks, towns, buildings, and roads. Incidentally, the last tract of Holland Land Company was sold in 1836, the year the town of Wheatfield was founded. Mr. Ellicott has left the building, but Mr. Dennis Upton will return to answer any questions that you may have. And for me, thank you very much for coming.
Here I am. Yes, ma'am.
Was Ellicott City, Maryland named after your family?
Yes. Yeah. And it was interesting this past winter when we were in Florida. I was at something like a Shade's down there, sitting next to a woman talking to her, and I said, "Where are you from?" And she said, "Ellicott Hills." I said, "I can tell you a story." I did.
Did the Indians get their cows delivered?
Of course it did. Yeah, there would have been issues. I think if you read anything about those three leaders, Seneca, Planters, Farmer's Brother, they were indeed well respected in what they did.
They were smart to get that much cows.
Well, because cows at that time didn't really exist in any number. So to get 60 cows, that was very
Yeah, but you're looking at milk and food and work animals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then proportionately they'll have more.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm. Any questions? Others? Somebody has asked me before, how did I start doing this? Have any of you been to the Haus in Genesee Street? That's a wonderful place. If you've never been there, put it on this summer's bucket list. Go see the Haus. It's the oldest Erie County stone home. 1810, I think, is when they bought the property. Warren Hull bought it from Holland Land Company and started, and they've restored that beautifully. But what they had there about 3 or 4 years ago, they had a time when you could buy tickets to come here, 6 people do 7-minute talks, and I was one of those people. And after doing this 2 different times, I thought, Joseph Ellicott deserves more than just a timeline of his life. So I decided I was going to try to build an onion called Joseph Ellicott, one layer at a time. my background, I was a teacher before I retired 20 years ago. And I'm a performer. And I've done improvisational work. I cannot memorize a script to save my life, but I can get up and talk. So I read and read and read. And so if you came to every talk I give, it'll be similar, but never the same. Because I go with the flow of whatever's going on in my head. So getting to perform and teach, I'm still teaching. I don't think many of us knew anything of Joseph Ellicott, even his first name. We knew of Ellicottville, Ellicott Creek. There's an Ellicott Road, like in every township. Have you ever heard of Transit Road? Can you guess how it got its name? That's pretty. Yeah,
But not for Joseph Ellicott. I didn't know that part.
right. And if you went to the very end of Transit Road on Lake Ontario, town of Ellicott, now if you follow 78, it bends. But Old Transit Road comes out about half a mile east of Ellicott. There's now a marker, one of the blue and yellow state markers. It says this marks the spot where the Western Transit line, whatever. There was a stone there. The stone was chiseled with a lot of information, including the name Willink, which is a big investment name. There's a town of Willink. It's one of the first towns near Batavia. They decided to take that stone and put it in the Newfane Historical Society. That's a nice little place to go visit, too. I think it's a corner of West Creek Road and Ide Road. And they have a nice spring festival. They have a number of buildings there. And you can actually see the stone that was put in place. I've done this a number of times, and sometimes there have been surveyors in the audience. And the surveyor said they went to the southern end, right near Allegheny State Park, and using modern GPS systems, kept searching, trying to find the southern stone. It had fallen over and gotten buried by debris. They eventually found it. And they've now put that in the Allegheny State Park Museum. But they said they took the marking of where it was, and they used the GPS to try and find some of the stones. And going out 7, 8, 9 miles, it might only be 30 feet off, 40 feet off. This is the 1790s, using a compass, a chain, and the transit. The transit was state of the art at the time. So that, to me, that boggles my mind. We drove through the Tonawanda Swamp, actually on a car cruise. Did you go on that cruise? And the swamp was incredible. And I'm thinking, driving through this, guys were walking through with a chain 66 feet long, making a mark, counting to 80, putting a stone in place, and starting again. And that just is amazing to me. And the number of small lakes, we were talking earlier, somebody with the number of small lakes that are in western New York, not just the Finger Lakes, but small lakes. There's Cuba and Line and all of that stuff. But sometimes you might have to straight line it. And it's an amazing feat, what they did back then. I sort of portrayed Ellicott as though he's somehow on a learning spectrum. We talk a lot about the spectrum now, people who might be in an autistic way. Very, very accurate, very good on order, discipline, but lacking in social skills. And that's the way I choose to portray him, because I think that does justice to what he was and what he did. When he passed away, his estate was worth $660,000 in 1826, which is maybe 13, 14 million, whatever it is nowadays. I think he lived well and wisely.
What happened to
His estate, if you read about it, it was like 13 or 15 pages of notes, and everybody who got what. He had favorites, the twins, Rachel and Benjamin. Actually, another spot to visit, Holland Land Office Museum. Anybody ever been there? Great spot to visit. Another good spot, the cemetery in Batavia, where he's buried with the twins. The sister brought him back. They have a big obelisk. There's wrought iron around the site. The whole cemetery is like a historical site. We started driving in it, and all of a sudden you're on gravel and thinking, I don't know if I should drive any farther. Park the car to get out and walk around. It's a beautiful two-stop trip to go to the museum and the cemetery.
Is Joseph Ellicott's home still in Batavia?
Good question. There is a picture of Ellicott's home. Somebody had a photograph of it, and if you can imagine it, a giant wing, and a bigger house in the center with 25 rooms. One of those wings was moved not far away, so it does exist. The rest of the house is gone. Now, there's a lady who wrote a book. She's from Lewiston, and I had the pleasure yesterday of having a talk with her. My wife and I went out to meet her. She wrote a book called River Burning, War of 1812 in Lewiston, where a little girl, the house is burned, her dad, she can't find him, so she sets out to find her aunt, who has become Joseph Ellicott's housekeeper. So Joseph Ellicott is brought to life in her book. So when I went to visit her, she's a delightful woman, 91 years old. Her father wrote the first 21 Hardy Boy mysteries. Yeah, but he couldn't tell anybody that he was Franklin Dixon. He got $100 a book. That's the Depression. Write a book, here's money. Anyhow, I had a wonderful visit with her about this and about the fact that Joseph Ellicott was brought into it. Now, Newfane Elementary Schools use this book, and they've contacted me to come and talk to the kids. And I'm doing that, I think, May 15th. And I thought, what a great thing if I could meet Nora Perez. I've got pictures taken with her. But when I showed up, here's how I showed up. Now that Joseph Ellicott is coming to meet you. and again, if you find this book, it's beautifully written. Some people are wordsmiths and they make sentences that dance and come to life. And I've read 3 of her books, and they're all like that. So that's just a plug for Nora Perez and her ability. So, yes, ma'am.
We're all familiar with Transit Road.
Right.
Are there any other areas in the original Holland Land Company that use the word transit still?
Throughout
Throughout the country?
There are some in New York, but how many town line roads have you heard of?
Oh, yeah.
Like every town, doesn't it have a town line road? I grew up in Town Line Road, Wilson. In fact, we had this big stone in our front yard, and my mother kept saying, that's a Holland Land Company stone. We used it like for third base when we were playing baseball. Yeah. That's a stone. So I went to visit the stone last year. I wanted to see it up close. When I got there, the stone was no longer in the corner like by where the road is. It was now in the lawn like 25 feet. And so I knocked on the door. I was talking to the owner. He said a lady was coming down the road, hit the ditch, came out of the ditch, hit the stone, and pushed it. I said, you probably don't know how significant that stone is. My oldest brother can recall our former principal, who was a surveyor part-time, using that stone to survey them. So there are stones out there. That one, unfortunately, is moved, and he wanted to move it like near his front door, and I thought, oh, no. But they may not be found anymore, or they've been moved because people don't know what it was. But he actually created like battleship. If you read the code on the stone, he knew right where you were. A pretty brilliant idea for that
What did
time.
these codes look like? I mean, were they numbers or letters or
It was numbers. Yeah, and I think as I recall reading something about it, he started down here Pennsylvania like with 1-1, and then the numbers got bigger as he went toward Ontario.
I understood that Transit Road was an Indian path.
Well, I think
Could it use the Indian path at the time as the standard?
many of the major roads were Indian paths. I think Main Street when you figure where Easer Ransom Inn is located, and every 10 miles, start going toward Batavia, build an inn. If you build it, they will come. Yeah.
On the deed to my house in North Tonawanda, it makes reference to a mile reserve. Can you explain what that means?
Yes. Along the Niagara River, and this was actually, I think, back maybe coming out of the Revolutionary War, they set aside 1 mile reserve from the river that was not going to be public property. It was belonging to the military. Because military, Fort Niagara, getting up to Black Rock, needed to transport their goods. So they kept that 1 mile reserve for the military at that time. And that was before Ellicott even came about. So he didn't survey that particular area. But many people will go back and find Holland Land Company on their deeds in this area. I'm on Grand Island. Grand Island was in that area. The islands of the Niagara were not part of the surveying either. But Easer Ransom owned a piece of Grand Island where I live, so it's like, can't get away from it.
I was gonna say too, if anyone has ever researched their property, lot township the range is your number in system. So
Right.
it keeps you organized when you're trying to find your land and who owned it.
Yeah, and some of the maps up here, I think one of them over there, the colorful one on the far left, these are all maps actually from the lifetime of Joseph Ellicott. So I tried to keep it everything 1824, where I'm telling the story from when he started in 1801, 1804, at the time. And he wanted Buffalo to be New Amsterdam because of his respect for the Holland Land Company. You see, the money from Europe, they were Wall Street. I can't say the words Wall Street because in 1824 it didn't exist. I can just say the money from the world was in Holland. But think of it, they sent out Henry Hudson, they sent explorers out. They're looking for new land that they would invest in back in 1500s.
So how did Buffalo? I didn't see you. Go ahead.
Wasn't either New York City or Albany called New Amsterdam at
New
one time?
York City.
I seem to remember that from history.
New York City was in the beginning.
Yeah.
Albany was in Fort Orange or something.
I believe it was something like that.
So how did New York City, New Amsterdam, get New Amsterdam into Buffalo?
I think New Amsterdam probably changed its name, New York City, before this was happening.
Right.
The first,
Yeah.
British took it over.
Yeah, it was.
and I imagine they were trying to change things to make it British York,
From when
England.
I was taught in school, the Dutch got mad at Stuyvesant and kicked him out and welcomed the British in.
Mhm.
Yeah, the place was going to be bombarded by the British at one point, and Stuyvesant had been sent over. He's something of a renegade from the Dutch point of view, and he was sent to the place in New Amsterdam to clean up the place. There were braggarts and prostitutes. There was getting a little lawless. He comes over with a wooden leg because he had it blown off during some kind of a battle beforehand, and he got everything all originated. But within a decade or so of him being appointed, the British are coming in. They're about to shell the place, and his own citizens came in with a petition saying, "Sir, before you fire a shot, we'd like you to surrender the city to the British. We don't want our assets. We don't want our holdings to be blown away by this. We don't honestly care who runs the town as long as our assets are protected. So you can leave now." And Stuyvesant was up to here. He couldn't believe that, but he had to respect his people. If that was what they wanted, okay. And they marched him out honorably, and he lived up by Central Park on the outskirts of town for the rest of his life.
I always get some good answers everywhere I go. Things I'm not sure of. That's good.
Because here in this group, some of us are interested in possible French Protestant Huguenot ancestry. I read a series, a three-part trilogy of a story of a Huguenot man and wife who, it goes on and on and on, but I learned a lot of history. But part of it, that he was in, this one main character, fictitious, was in New Amsterdam. and they talk about when it became New York.
Oh, yeah,
And somehow the date 1664 sticks in my head.
the
I don't
Dutch
know if it's
welcomed the
right.
Protestants.
Yeah,
Well, I think
Yeah.
they were probably welcoming lots of people.
and
people
the
come
thing was
settle.
that I thought, I had already known about New Paltz, but in this historical fiction made up family, they talk about New Rochelle. I thought, how did you not figure that out yourself? Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah. Are there any more questions?
I had one more. The Frontier House in the village of Lewiston is being restored and is going to be open again. It was built 200 years ago this year. Was Joseph Ellicott ever there? I think he was, but I'm not sure.
Because that's probably inside the 1 mile reserve, I wouldn't think so. But also because when he went over to find the western boundary of New York by going, I think that's so cool, actually.
Yeah.
Go find it and go. Something that's cool.
Yeah.
Nothing was there at the time because this was back in the 1780s, early 90s, that he would have done that. So I don't know
Like
if he ever went that area.
or in later years or something.
I wouldn't know that.
Okay, just curious.
But it's
I was
not.
going to ask that too. Where did he cross the river and did he ever see Niagara Falls?
Yeah, I would think that he crossed below the falls because it'd be easier. And because that's a question I wondered myself. Where's an easier spot to do it? Not above. Unless you can roll
Or
really
walk
fast.
across like here, nice.
Yeah. But I just think the whole thing of, okay, go find the end of the lake. Okay, is there a sign? Got a couple horses, yeah. Ellicott was a big man. He was 6'3". I can't do
Wow,
it. I can't put blocks on my shoes. But imagine how imposing he would have been to people who probably averaged 5'8". If he came, would you question a man of that size and who didn't care what you thought?
I can see how he made enemies.
Yeah, but you can see why people wanted to employ him.
Oh, yeah, he was honest.
He'd get the job done. Sure.
Did he ever come in contact with George Washington in regards to surveying?
That's a good question. He did come in contact with Pickering, so I don't know if he ever met Washington or Franklin. There are very good chances he may have. Somebody told me a story when I was talking in Lewiston. It was this lady loves Ellicott. She knows more than I do, so you tell the story. But she's telling the story of Farmer's brother. And she said, when Farmer's brother, he had a Seneca name, he actually met George Washington. And they were both talking that they are both farmers. And he said, then I am Farmer's brother. And I thought, isn't that a great story? Sure, not a great story. Another interesting story, two things about Ellicott. I found at the historical Buffalo History Museum, written by his great nephew. So it's sort of first person. And he said, in describing his great uncle, Joseph Ellicott, when he would meet Native Americans, Senecas, they often had a small tuft of chin hair, but not very thick, because their hair isn't often, their facial hair is not very thick. And he'd often pull it. They came up with a name for him, and it was the Seneca word for mosquito. But another story that I think is so powerful, and they had Red Jacket and Ellicott sitting on a tree trunk, laying on the ground in the woods. And not much was being spoken, because that's sort of the way of the Seneca. And then Red Jacket said, move along, Joe.
Yeah.
And Joe moved down a little bit. And it happened again. Move along, Joe. And finally, Joe was at the end of the tree trunk, and he said, there's no more place for me to go. And Red Jacket said, that's what you've done to us. Yeah, that's very deep, isn't it? So it's kind of I don't tell it during my talk, because I'm not sure how real it is, but it sure is profound as far as that goes. Have you?
Was there an official diagnosis, that Joseph
No,
William assented, you said, right?
he hanged himself, but I don't know what caused the black dog. In fact, the term black dog is from her book. So when I read that, I thought, that is so good, I'm going to steal it and use it. But when I've read some descriptions, they're not kind descriptions in his later years, because people thought he was representing the Dutch, and they were taking their money, sending it to Europe. At one point, after he resigned, he tried to buy the unsold land and think he could sell it. But that didn't quite work out. I think it was in the 1830s, the Holland Land Company sold everything they had and got out. It's like, that's
Right, right.
Anyhow, so that's Joseph Ellicott. If you want to see me do anything else, I'm Santa Claus at the Buffalo Zoo.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And
I have to say, we're talking history, okay? And I just put this on my Facebook page this morning. On the 18th of April, 75, hardly a man is now alive who remembers, come on, you know it, that famous day and year, the Midnight Ride. Oh,
I guess. My wife and I, Rita and I, have been able
Yeah, we're going to be part of Open Gardens, which I think is Friday, and then the Grand Island.
I never knew winds up very west of
It's been organized. It's
how they can do that with their technology. It's incredible. Oh, that line's wow. You know, if you take this line here, straight up to, yeah.
right now, the Welland Canal is right here.
I don't think so. Yeah, it's amazing.
This looks even a little different.
There's,